My name is Amber Mitchell, and at 29, I was finally about to have the wedding of my dreams with my fiancé Ryan. What should have been the happiest time of my life turned into a nightmare when I accidentally overheard my parents planning to humiliate me on my big day. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife, but I refused to let them ruin everything. The way I turned their cruel plan against them is something I'll never forget. Before I tell you how I transformed from their target to watching them become the laughingstock of my wedding, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members. Growing up as the only child of Jennifer and Robert Mitchell wasn't the nurturing experience most would imagine. Our house in the suburbs of Boston looked picture-perfect from the outside: meticulously landscaped lawn, freshly painted colonial exterior, and a garage that housed 2 luxury vehicles. But inside those walls, appearances meant everything, and nothing I ever did seemed good enough. Mom was a former beauty queen turned real estate agent who scrutinized every aspect of my existence. My earliest memories include her placing me on a bathroom scale at age 7 and frowning at the number. "Amber, at this rate, you'll never fit into a proper prom dress," she'd say, sliding a plate with half a grapefruit in front of me instead of the pancakes my friends got at sleepovers. "Jennifer, leave the girl alone," Dad would occasionally interject, barely looking up from his Wall Street Journal. But his defense was half-hearted at best. Robert Mitchell, senior partner at a prestigious law firm, believed parenting was primarily my mother's domain while he focused on building his career and golf handicap. My clothes were never fashionable enough, my grades never quite perfect enough, and my extracurricular achievements never impressive enough to earn more than a distracted nod. The only consistent praise came when I could be used as a prop at their country club gatherings. "This is our daughter, Amber. She just made honor roll," Mom would announce proudly to her friends, her arm around my shoulder in a rare display of physical affection that disappeared the moment we reached the car. "Your hair looked awful under those lights. We need to get you highlights." High school brought new challenges as I developed curves that didn't match my mother's willowy frame. The weekly weigh-ins continued, accompanied now by not-so-subtle brochures for weight loss camps left on my bed. Dad remained buried in work, missing my debate team championships and orchestra concerts. When he did attend, he'd spend most of the time networking with other parents or checking emails on his BlackBerry. "Your father is building our future," Mom would explain when I expressed disappointment. "You should be grateful for the lifestyle his dedication provides." When college acceptance letters arrived, I chose University of Michigan, partly for their excellent journalism program, but mostly because it was 1,000 miles from Boston. My parents pushed for Northeastern or Boston College where they could maintain their influence, but for once I stood firm. Those 4 years away transformed me. Without my mother's watchful eye, I stopped obsessing over every calorie. I found friends who appreciated my sense of humor and intelligence rather than my ability to fit into designer jeans. I discovered my passion for investigative journalism and landed internships at respected publications. For the first time, I felt valued for who I was, not criticized for who I wasn't. After graduation, I accepted a position at a digital media company in Chicago, putting another state between my parents and me. Our communication dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional strained visit. Each time I returned home, Mom would eye me up and down, making comments about filling out, while Dad asked when I planned to get a real job at an established newspaper. Chicago is where I met Ryan Thompson. Unlike the preppy finance guys my parents had tried to set me up with, Ryan was a creative, compassionate architect who designed affordable housing projects. We met at a charity fundraiser where I was covering the event for my company's social impact section, and he was receiving an award for innovative urban design. What struck me first about Ryan wasn't his tall frame or warm smile, though both were appealing, but how attentively he listened when I spoke. After years of being interrupted or dismissed, having someone genuinely interested in my thoughts felt revolutionary. Our relationship progressed naturally. We moved in together after a year, adopting a rescue dog named Cooper and creating the warm home environment I'd always craved. When Ryan proposed on our second anniversary during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Calling my parents with the news revealed exactly what I'd expected. Mom immediately asked about Ryan's family background and income, while Dad wanted to know if we'd signed a prenuptial agreement. "He's an architect, not a partner at Goldman Sachs," Mom said later when we spoke privately. "You could have aimed higher, Amber." Despite their lukewarm reaction, I felt obligated to include them in our wedding plans. Ryan encouraged me to extend the olive branch, believing family relationships could heal with effort. His own parents, Karen and Michael Thompson, were supportive, down-to-earth people who welcomed me warmly from the start. "Maybe your parents will come around when they see how happy we are," Ryan suggested optimistically. We decided on a mid-sized wedding that reflected our values: locally sourced catering, a historic library venue, sustainable decorations, and a charitable donation in lieu of party favors. The guest list included 120 people who genuinely cared about us, plus my parents and a few of their closest friends they insisted on inviting. My mother immediately pushed for a country club reception with premium open bar and a seated 5-course dinner. "People expect a certain standard from the Mitchell family," she insisted. When I stood firm on our chosen venue, she reluctantly backed down but made sure I knew she was settling. Looking back, I should have recognized the signs of their growing resentment. The terse emails about guest accommodations. Dad's questions about whether Ryan's artistic job could support a family. Mom's backhanded compliments about my dress being brave for someone with my body type. But nothing prepared me for what I would discover 2 months before the wedding day: a betrayal so calculated that it would forever change my relationship with the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. 8 weeks before the wedding, I drove to my parents' home in Boston to discuss final arrangements. They'd agreed to contribute financially to the ceremony, though their contribution came with strings attached that I was still navigating. The purpose of this visit was to review the guest list one last time and coordinate airport pickups for relatives flying in from out of town. I arrived 20 minutes early, having misjudged Friday afternoon traffic. When I pulled into the circular driveway, both my parents' cars were there, indicating they were home. Rather than wait in the car, I used my old house key to let myself in, planning to surprise them. The marble-floored foyer was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. I slipped off my shoes out of habit. Mom never allowed outdoor footwear on her imported rugs, and called out softly, "Mom? Dad? It's Amber." No response came, but I heard muffled voices from my father's study at the end of the hallway. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar, a strip of light spilling onto the corridor carpet. As I approached, planning to knock, my mother's voice became clear, her tone unusually animated. "Robert, we need to finalize our approach for this wedding disaster." I refused to sit back while Amber parades around with her bargain bin celebration. I froze mid-step, my hands suspended inches from the door. "Jennifer, keep your voice down." "She'll be here any minute," my father responded, his tone weary but conspiratorial. "I've already prepared my speech as mother of the bride. I'll start with a few emotional anecdotes about Amber as a child, then smoothly transition into her challenging years. Remember when she gained 30 pounds in college? I have those Christmas photos digitized. I thought we could include them in the slideshow right after her thin high school pictures." My stomach dropped. I'd worked so hard to overcome the body image issues my mother had instilled in me. Those college years represented freedom and self-acceptance, not something to be mocked. "Isn't that a bit obvious?" my father asked. "Not if I frame it as a journey. I'll talk about how she finally found someone willing to accept her flaws. It will sound complimentary while making it clear Ryan settled for less." I leaned against the wall, legs suddenly weak. My mother continued, her voice taking on the planning tone she used for her real estate open houses. "And did you reach out to David Whitman?" "Yes, though I still think that's going too far," my father replied. "David confirmed he'll attend as my +1 colleague. Amber hasn't seen him since they broke up senior year of high school." My high school boyfriend. The pre-med student my parents adored who went on to become a cardiac surgeon. The relationship they referenced whenever Ryan's career came up. "Remember how ambitious David was?" they'd say, the comparison unspoken but obvious. "It's perfect," Mom insisted. "We'll seat him at the family table." When he mentions his recent promotion to chief of cardiology, it will highlight the stark difference in their life choices. Ryan designs apartments while David saves lives. The Thompson family will be easily outshined, Dad added, warming to the plan. I looked into their background. His father ran a plumbing business before retiring. Can you imagine? Our friends will understand exactly what Amber has aligned herself with. I've already spoken to Kathleen and Richard about the venue, Mom said, referring to her best friends. They know to ask loudly about why we aren't at the country club. I'll sigh and explain that we had to respect the young couple's unique vision, which should make it clear this wasn't our choice. And the gift? Dad asked. The check will be modest. Enough to save face, but not enough to truly help. We'll present it with a card mentioning that we're setting aside the rest for when Amber comes to her senses. Everyone will understand. My face burned with humiliation and rage. The calculated cruelty of their plans stunned me. These were my parents, the people who were supposed to love and protect me. Instead, they were meticulously plotting to undermine the most important day of my life. What about her work friends? Dad asked. That supervisor she keeps mentioning. Lisa Campbell, the editor? I've prepared for her too. I'll be sure to mention how surprised we are that Amber chose journalism over law school, dropping little hints about her trust fund that would have covered Harvard. By dessert, everyone will know she took the easy road. I must have made a sound, a gasp or whimper, because suddenly their conversation stopped. Did you hear something? Dad asked. Acting on instinct, I quickly but silently retreated down the hallway and out the front door. In the safety of my car, parked now around the corner, I texted my mother, stuck in traffic. Running 30 minutes late. See you soon. Her reply came immediately. No problem, dear. Dad and I are just having coffee. Drive safely. The casual lie confirmed everything. With shaking hands, I called my best friend Melissa. They're planning to humiliate me, I said when she answered, tears flowing freely now. At my own wedding. My own parents. Melissa's outrage matched my pain. Cancel their invitation right now. They don't deserve to be there. I can't just uninvite my parents, I said, though part of me wanted to do exactly that. Then confront them. Tell them you heard everything. I considered this option, imagining the scene, my parents' shocked faces, their quick denials, the inevitable argument where they'd twist everything to make me seem oversensitive or paranoid. In the end, they'd either cancel their contribution to spite me or superficially apologize while finding more subtle ways to undermine the wedding. No, I said, a strange calm settling over me as a different approach formed in my mind. I'm going to handle this another way. What are you thinking? Melissa asked, recognizing my tone. I spent years as an investigative journalist before moving to feature writing. I know how to research, plan, and execute a story, I said, starting my car. It's time to put those skills to use in my personal life. Amber, what are you going to do? I'm going to let them think their plan is working, I replied, pulling away from my childhood home, and then I'm going to beat them at their own game. That evening, I sat Ryan down in our Chicago apartment and told him everything I'd overheard. His expression shifted from shock to disbelief to anger as I recounted my parents' plans in detail. Cancel their invitation, he said immediately, echoing Melissa's reaction. We don't need that toxicity on our day. I've thought about it, I admitted, curling up beside him on our sofa as Cooper settled at our feet. But uninviting them feels like letting them win somehow. They'd play the victim to everyone who would listen. Who cares what they say? Your happiness matters more. I know, but this isn't just about the wedding day. It's about finally addressing the dynamic that's existed my entire life. If I just cut them off, nothing changes. They never face consequences for their behavior. Ryan considered this, running a hand through his dark hair. So, what do you want to do? I want to neutralize their plan without stooping to their level. I want to maintain our dignity while making it impossible for them to hurt us. The next day, we convened an emergency meeting with our wedding party at Stephanie's apartment. My maid of honor had converted her living room into a war room, complete with whiteboard and the wedding planning binder. I can't believe they would do this, David, Ryan's best man and college roommate, said after I explained the situation. No offense, Amber, but your parents are monsters. Or we could just slash their tires the morning of the wedding, suggested bridesmaid Jamie, only half joking. We're not resorting to vandalism, I said firmly. We're going to be strategic. Think of this as a chess game. Where they're playing checkers, Ryan added with a supportive squeeze of my hand. Stephanie, ever practical, uncapped a marker. Let's break down each element of their plan and develop a countermeasure. Over the next hour, fueled by pizza and righteous indignation, we mapped out my parents' plot points and brainstormed responses. The initial suggestions were emotionally satisfying but impractical. We could have the DJ cut their mics during speeches, offered groomsman Tyler. Or seat them by the kitchen doors where servers will constantly bump their chairs, Jamie added. I shook my head, a clearer vision forming. We're not going to stoop to petty revenge. The goal isn't to humiliate them. It's to prevent them from humiliating me while making it clear that their behavior is the problem. What exactly do you want to achieve? Stephanie asked, marker poised. I considered carefully. I want our wedding to be the joyful day Ryan and I deserve. I want guests to see us for who we really are, not through my parents' distorted lens. And I want my parents to realize they can't control or diminish me anymore. Ryan nodded. So we need to neutralize each attack vector they're planning. Exactly, I agreed. First, the speech. Mom wants to highlight my challenging years and make subtle digs at my appearance and choices. We could change the speech order, Stephanie suggested. Have someone speak before her who celebrates those exact qualities she plans to criticize. Perfect, I said. And what about David Whitman, my ex they're bringing as a surprise guest? Easy, Ryan said with unexpected confidence. We welcome him warmly and make sure he knows he's been weaponized. Most people would be horrified to learn they're being used that way. The strategy continued to develop. For each element of my parents' plan, we crafted a thoughtful countermeasure that wouldn't create drama but would effectively neutralize their intentions. For their planned criticism of the venue, we decided to have our wedding planner specifically acknowledge my parents during toasts for embracing our vision even though it differed from tradition. This would make any subsequent complaints from them seem petty and contradictory. To counter their intended seating arrangements designed to highlight class differences, we reworked the entire seating chart to mix social circles intentionally, placing emphasis on shared interests rather than backgrounds. For their plan to present a modest check with strings attached, we prepared to graciously accept whatever they offered and immediately announce we'd be donating an equivalent amount to a charity supporting foster children, highlighting family bonds based on love rather than obligation. After the initial brainstorming, we brought our wedding planner Jessica into the loop. An industry veteran with 20 years of experience, she'd seen her share of family drama, but even she seemed shocked by my parents' calculated approach. In my career, I've dealt with divorced parents who refused to be in the same room, drunk uncles making inappropriate toasts, and even a grandmother who tried to wear a wedding dress to upstage the bride, she said. But I've never encountered parents so deliberately plotting to undermine their own daughter. Jessica proved invaluable, suggesting subtle timeline adjustments and staffing arrangements that would further protect our day. We'll position my assistant near your mother during key moments, she explained. If she tries to deviate from the approved speech topics, my assistant will create a small distraction. Spilled water, dropped utensil, anything to break the flow. Ryan's parents, Karen and Michael Thompson, were our next call. I was nervous about involving them, worried they might think I was bringing unnecessary drama into their son's life. Instead, they responded with immediate support and righteous anger on my behalf. Amber, honey, no parent should treat their child that way, Karen said, her Midwestern accent strong with emotion. You're family to us now, and we protect our family. Do you want me to talk to your father man-to-man? Michael offered. I appreciate that, I said, genuinely touched. But confronting them directly would only make them more defensive. We need them to reveal their true colors on their own. Karen had a practical suggestion. The mother-son dance happens right after the father-daughter dance at most weddings. Michael and I would be honored if you'd consider a special dance with him instead of your father. The offer brought tears to my eyes. That would be amazing, thank you. Over the next week, our counter-strategy developed into a comprehensive plan. We recruited trusted allies from various corners of our lives: my boss Lisa, who my mother planned to condescend to, Ryan's college friends who my father intended to snub, even my cousin Rebecca, who had experienced similar treatment from my parents over the years. Each person was given just enough information to help neutralize specific aspects of my parents' plan without creating broader drama or turning our wedding into a battleground. Most importantly, everyone understood that the goal wasn't revenge, it was protection and finally establishing boundaries. As our defense took shape, I found myself standing taller, sleeping better, and feeling more excited about our wedding than ever before. What had started as a devastating betrayal had transformed into an opportunity to finally address the dynamic that had shadowed my life for nearly 3 decades. You know what's ironic? I said to Ryan one night as we finalized details. By trying to ruin our wedding, they've actually given me the push I needed to stand up for myself. Sometimes people show you exactly who they are at exactly the right moment, he replied, kissing my forehead. The night before my next scheduled visit with my parents, I reviewed our strategy one final time. The plan wasn't about humiliating them, it was about protecting our special day while making it clear that their behavior was the problem, not me, not Ryan, and not our choices. Ready for tomorrow? Ryan asked as we got ready for bed. I nodded, a sense of calm determination replacing the hurt and anger I'd initially felt. For the first time in my life, I'm going to face my parents on my own terms. And regardless of what happens with them, our wedding will be beautiful because it will be authentic to us. What I didn't yet realize was how thoroughly our counter-strategy would expose my parents' true nature, not just to me, but to everyone in attendance. The final month before the wedding unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. On the surface, everything appeared normal. I maintained regular contact with my parents, discussing flower arrangements and reception details as if I hadn't heard their plot. Meanwhile, our counter-strategy developed in secret, with each member of our trusted circle prepared for their role. My mother's texts became increasingly frequent as the wedding approached. Remember to start that juice cleanse 2 weeks before, dear. Wedding photos are forever, she wrote one morning. Instead of my usual hurt reaction, I simply replied with a thumbs-up emoji and continued enjoying my breakfast. During a dress fitting 3 weeks before the wedding, my mother insisted on attending. She sat in the bridal salon, lips pursed as the seamstress made final adjustments to my A-line gown. I still think the mermaid style we saw at Bergdorf's would have been more slimming, she remarked, examining my reflection critically. This one makes your arms look substantial. The old me would have spent the night obsessing over my arms. The new me smiled serenely. Ryan loves my arms. He says they're strong from carrying all those heavy journalism awards. A flash of irritation crossed her face. Speaking of Ryan, have his parents figured out what they're wearing yet? I'm concerned they might not understand the dress code. Karen found a beautiful gown at Nordstrom, I replied. And Michael's tux is being custom made by the same tailor who dressed George Clooney for the Oscars. It wasn't entirely true. Ryan's parents had perfectly appropriate attire, but not from such prestigious sources. The misinformation was designed to preemptively neutralize my mother's planned criticism of their appearance. Oh, she said, clearly disappointed. How nice for them. The rehearsal dinner 5 days before the wedding represented another potential battlefield. My father hosted at an upscale steakhouse, appearing every bit the generous patriarch while making subtle digs throughout the evening. Ryan, he said, clapping my fiancé's shoulder too firmly, I understand your latest project is some sort of community housing complex? Fascinating to see architects dabbling in social work these days. Ryan, fully prepared, responded smoothly. Actually, Robert, our firm just won the American Institute of Architects Award for Innovative Urban Development for that project. The mayor's office estimates it will generate $4.3 million in economic impact for the neighborhood while providing affordable housing for essential workers. My father's smile tightened. How charitable. It's good business, Ryan corrected politely. The profit margin is actually higher than on luxury developments due to the tax incentives and streamlined approval process. I caught Stephanie's eye across the table, and she gave me a subtle thumbs up. Ryan had effectively countered my father's attempt to diminish his career without creating an obvious confrontation. Throughout the dinner, I noticed my parents exchanging glances whenever certain topics arose: my career achievements, our honeymoon plans, our vision for the wedding. Each time, I recognized the silent communication for what it was: recalibration of their sabotage strategy. As coffee and dessert were served, I decided to drop a hint that I wasn't as oblivious as they believed. "Mom, Dad," I said, raising my glass, "I want to thank you for contributing to our wedding. I know it might not be exactly what you envisioned, but it means so much that you're supporting our choices." My mother's smile froze. "Of course, dear. Though we still think the country club would have been more appropriate." "I know you do," I replied, meeting her gaze directly. "But Ryan and I are building our life based on our values, not others' expectations." I've learned how important that is. A flicker of uncertainty crossed my father's face. "What exactly does that mean?" I shrugged lightly. "Just that I've grown to recognize when something isn't right for me, even if it looks good on paper. Like that partnership track position at Crawford Legal you pushed me toward after college, or those blind dates with doctors and executives you arranged. Sometimes what seems perfect from the outside isn't right at all." My mother's hand tightened around her water glass. "Amber, this isn't the time for one of your dramatic statements." "Not dramatic at all," I said calmly. "Just reflecting on how clearly I can see things now." It's liberating. The tension was broken by the arrival of the check, which my father quickly claimed. As he reviewed the bill, I exchanged a glance with Ryan, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. Later that night in our hotel room, Ryan pulled me into a hug. "You were amazing. Did you see your dad's face when you mentioned seeing clearly?" "I think they suspect something," I admitted. "But they can't figure out exactly what I know or what I'm planning." "That's perfect," he said. "Keep them off balance." The night before our wedding, we gathered with our wedding party for a final review of our counter strategy. Each person confirmed their understanding of their role, from the speech sequence to the strategic placement of allies near my parents during key moments. "Remember," I told the group, "the goal isn't confrontation. It's protection and boundary setting. We want a joyful day that reflects who we truly are." That night, alone in my hotel suite while Ryan stayed with his groomsmen, I experienced a moment of doubt. Was I overreacting? Had I misinterpreted my parents' conversation? Was it fair to mobilize our entire wedding against them? I reread the detailed notes I'd made immediately after overhearing their plan, reminding myself of the calculated cruelty they'd displayed. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an overreaction. It was a necessary response to years of manipulation coming to a head on what should be the happiest day of my life. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Don't forget to use those under-eye patches I sent. The photographer arrives at 10 a.m. sharp. No, good luck," or "Can't wait to see you become a bride." Just another criticism disguised as concern. Any lingering doubt evaporated. I responded with a simple, "Everything is ready. See you tomorrow." And it was. Our counter-strategy was in place, our allies were prepared, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to face my parents as an adult with clear boundaries rather than a child seeking approval I would never receive. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. As my bridesmaids helped me prepare, I felt a surprising sense of calm. Whatever happened with my parents today, I would be marrying the man I loved, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for us. That was what mattered most. "Ready to become Mrs. Thompson?" Stephanie asked as she secured my veil. I smiled at my reflection, recognizing the strength in my eyes that had been developing over months of planning this day, both the wedding and the strategy to protect it. "More than ready," I replied. "Let's do this." The historic library we'd chosen transformed beautifully into a wedding venue. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating bookshelves that had been decorated with small arrangements of wildflowers and vintage hardcovers. Rows of white chairs faced an arch woven with greenery and soft blue blooms that matched Ryan's eyes. From my preparation room, I could hear guests arriving, their voices creating a gentle hum of anticipation. Stephanie peeked through the doorway and reported that everything was proceeding according to plan. "Your parents just arrived," she whispered. Your mom's wearing that ice blue designer suit she mentioned, and your dad's checking his watch every 30 seconds like he has somewhere more important to be. I nodded, unsurprised. And Operation Ex-Boyfriend. David Whitman arrived with your dad's colleague group. Jessica intercepted him immediately and explained the situation. He was horrified to learn he was being used as a pawn and has agreed to help us instead. He's actually brought his husband. Your parents apparently didn't realize he came out 3 years ago. That detail made me smile despite the tension. My parents' plan was already unraveling, and the ceremony hadn't even started. Ryan's parents are running interference with yours, Stephanie continued. Your mom tried to rearrange some of the seating cards, but Karen accidentally spilled water on the table, so the coordinator had to reset it according to our original plan. The ceremony began right on schedule. Standing at the back of the room with my cousin Thomas, who I'd asked to walk me down the aisle instead of my father, I took a deep breath. "You look beautiful, Amber," Thomas whispered. "And more importantly, you look happy." I realized. Despite everything, this moment was still magical. As the music swelled and we began our walk, I saw my parents in the front row. My mother's smile was tight, her eyes assessing my appearance critically. My father stood stiffly beside her, looking more like he was attending a business meeting than his daughter's wedding. But then my gaze found Ryan, waiting for me beneath the arch, his expression so full of love that everything else faded away. This was our moment, and nothing could diminish it. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt. We'd written our own vows, each promising to support the other's dreams, to communicate honestly, and to choose each other every day. When Ryan spoke about finding a home in me after years of searching, I noticed even my stoic father seemed momentarily moved. After the celebratory recessional, we took photos while guests moved to the reception area. My mother approached as the photographer was arranging a family shot. "Your dress photographs better than I expected," she said, adjusting my veil unnecessarily. "Though you might want to stand at a slight angle. It's more flattering for your figure." Before I could respond, our photographer Julia intervened. "Actually, Amber's symmetrical features photograph beautifully head-on. It's why fashion models are often shot that way." She positioned me directly facing the camera. "Perfect, you look stunning." My mother retreated, momentarily stymied, and I gave Julia a grateful smile. She was another ally we'd briefed on the situation. The reception began with cocktail hour in the library's garden courtyard. Ryan and I made our entrance to enthusiastic applause, and I immediately noticed my father cornering Ryan's dad near the bar. From Michael's tight smile, I could tell the conversation wasn't pleasant. Right on cue, Lisa, my editor and mentor, approached them with champagne flutes. "Michael, I've been meaning to ask you about that vintage motorcycle restoration you mentioned. My brother's obsessed with Indian motorcycles too." My father, excluded from a conversation he couldn't contribute to, drifted away looking annoyed. One potential confrontation successfully diverted. During dinner, I watched my mother scanning the room critically, no doubt looking for flaws to point out later. Her opportunity would come during speeches, which we'd carefully rearranged from tradition. Normally, the father of the bride speaks first, followed by the mother, and then the best man. We'd adjusted the order so that Ryan's father would speak first, followed by my maid of honor Stephanie, then my mother, and finally Ryan's best man David. Michael Thompson stood and tapped his glass. When Ryan first brought Amber home to meet us, Karen and I knew immediately she was special. Not because of her impressive career or her education, but because of her kindness, her resilience, and the way she loves our son fully and authentically. He continued with stories about our relationship, emphasizing qualities my parents had always dismissed: my compassion, my creativity, my determination. Amber represents the values we've always tried to instill in our children: integrity, hard work, and the courage to forge your own path even when it's difficult. I glanced at my mother, whose smile had become brittle. Michael was effectively highlighting everything she'd planned to subtly criticize, making it impossible for her to do so without seeming petty. Stephanie spoke next, cleverly addressing my journey before my mother could weaponize it. I've known Amber since college, when we were both figuring out who we wanted to be. I've watched her transform from someone who tried to meet others' expectations to a woman who lives authentically on her own terms. That evolution wasn't always easy, but it created the strong, confident person we celebrate today. By the time my mother rose to speak, many of her planned barbs had been preemptively neutralized. She glanced at her prepared notes, clearly recalculating. As Amber's mother, she began with practiced emotion. I've had the privilege of watching her grow from a precocious child to the woman she is today. I held my breath, waiting for the subtle dig that would follow. There were challenging times, of course, she continued, and I saw several of our friends tense in anticipation. Times when Amber struggled with her direction. Before she could elaborate, a server accidentally bumped the table, causing a water glass to topple. While not part of our plan, the distraction worked perfectly, forcing my mother to pause while the mess was cleaned up. By the time she resumed, her rhythm was broken. What I mean to say is she recovered, glancing at the increasingly restless audience. We always knew Amber would find her way eventually. She finished with a stilted congratulations that lacked genuine warmth, but also lacked the cutting remarks I knew she'd planned. As she sat down, I caught my father giving her a disapproving look. Clearly her performance hadn't delivered their intended message. The reception continued with dinner, and I noticed David Whitman, my ex-boyfriend, approaching our table with his husband Stephen. My parents watched in confusion as David warmly congratulated us. "Ryan, it's great to finally meet you," he said, shaking my husband's hand. "Amber and I dated a lifetime ago, but I've followed her career and always knew she'd find someone special." "We appreciate you coming," Ryan replied smoothly. "Especially once you realize the unusual circumstances of your invitation." David lowered his voice. "I was horrified when your wedding planner explained. For what it's worth, I always thought your parents were overly controlling during our high school years. I'm glad you found someone who appreciates you for who you really are." My father approached, clearly expecting an awkward encounter between my current and former partners. Instead, he found us chatting amicably, with David's husband included in the conversation. "David," my father said stiffly, "I see you've reintroduced yourself to Amber." "Yes, and met her wonderful husband," David replied cheerfully. "Stephen and I were just saying what a beautiful, unique wedding this is, so much more personal than those cookie-cutter country club affairs, don't you think?" My father's face darkened. Another element of their plan effectively neutralized. As the evening progressed, I became aware of a pattern. Wherever my parents went, our friends and allies materialized to counter their attempts at sabotage. When my mother commented loudly about the quaint dessert table, instead of a traditional tiered cake, we'd chosen an assortment of pies from a local bakery. Ryan's Aunt Clara immediately enthused about how refreshingly unique and delicious everything was. When my father attempted to corner Ryan's groomsmen with probing questions about his financial prospects, Lisa smoothly redirected the conversation to Ryan's recent feature in Architectural Digest. The final confrontation came during the dancing portion of the evening. Traditionally, the father-daughter dance would precede the mother-son dance. However, when the DJ announced it was time for these special moments, my father stepped forward only to be confused when I remained seated. "Actually," the DJ said, "following our revised plan, Amber has asked Michael Thompson to stand in for this special dance." A murmur went through the crowd as Ryan's father extended his hand to me with a warm smile. My father stood frozen on the edge of the dance floor, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. As Michael twirled me gently to Stevie Wonder's "Isn't She Lovely?" he whispered, "You're doing great, Amber. Karen and I couldn't be prouder of how you're handling this." Over his shoulder, I could see my parents in intense conversation, my mother's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. They hadn't anticipated this public replacement, and it effectively communicated to everyone present that something was amiss with our relationship. When the dance ended, I returned to my seat beside Ryan, who squeezed my hand in support. "You okay?" he murmured. "Better than okay," I assured him. As the party continued, my parents made increasingly desperate attempts to regain control of the narrative. My mother cornered various guests, no doubt trying to spin her version of events, but our friends skillfully deflected her efforts. The moment everything truly unraveled came unexpectedly during the cake cutting. As Ryan and I prepared to cut the small ceremonial cake we'd included alongside our pie selection, my mother loudly remarked, "Well, at least they managed something traditional, though I had hoped for the five-tier design I suggested." I turned to her, aware that nearby guests had heard. Taking a deep breath, I made the decision to address the behavior directly but with dignity. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice calm but carrying in the sudden hush, "I want to thank you for being here today, even though I know it's not the wedding you would have chosen." My mother's eyes widened in alarm. "I overheard your plans to undermine our day," I continued steadily, the speech highlighting my challenging years. Bringing David as a surprise guest. Criticizing our choices to anyone who would listen. Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. My father stepped forward, his lawyer face firmly in place. "Amber, this is hardly the time or place." "It's exactly the time and place," I countered. "For years, I've accepted criticism and manipulation because I desperately wanted your approval. But I don't need it anymore. I have built a life filled with people who love me unconditionally." I gestured to Ryan, our friends, and his family. "These people support our choices even when they might choose differently themselves. That's what love looks like." My mother's face had drained of color. "How dare you create a scene at your own wedding? This is exactly the sort of dramatic, attention-seeking behavior we've always tried to correct." "Jennifer," my father warned, aware of the watching crowd. "No, Robert," she snapped. "I won't stand here and be lectured by our daughter who has rejected every advantage we've given her. This bargain basement wedding is just another example of her stubborn refusal to meet expectations." The true nature of her feelings, carefully hidden behind passive-aggressive comments for years, was now on full display. Guests watched in shocked silence as she continued. "We gave you every opportunity, the best schools, connections, guidance, and you've thrown it away for this. This life you've chosen with a man who designs housing projects instead of skyscrapers." Ryan stepped forward, his arm steady around my waist. "Mrs. Mitchell, with all due respect, Amber hasn't thrown anything away. She's built a life that makes her happy and successful on her own terms." "I'm sorry that's not enough for you." My father, ever conscious of appearances, attempted damage control. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No need," I said. "We've had private discussions for years, and nothing changes. I'm done pretending everything is fine when it isn't. I'm done accepting conditional love." I turned to our guests. "Everyone, please continue celebrating with us. This moment has been a long time coming, and, honestly, it feels like the final step in becoming truly myself." With perfect timing, David clinked his glass and stood. "I'd like to propose a toast to Amber and Ryan, two people who have the courage to live authentically and love genuinely. May we all be so brave." Glasses raised around the room as my parents stood in isolated silence. After a moment's hesitation, they gathered their things and walked out of the reception without another word. As the door closed behind them, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Ryan kissed my temple gently. "Proud of you," he whispered. The party resumed with renewed energy, and surprisingly, the celebration felt more joyful without the cloud of my parents' disapproval hovering over it. Multiple guests approached throughout the evening to offer support. I cut ties with my toxic mother 3 years ago, confided a colleague from work. "Hardest and best decision I ever made." "Your speech was so brave," said Ryan's cousin. "It made me reconsider some relationships in my own life." What had begun as a defensive strategy had transformed into something unexpected, an authentic moment of truth that resonated with others fighting similar battles. As the night drew to a close, Ryan and I shared a final dance surrounded by people who truly cared for us. The absence of my parents no longer felt like a failure, but like the beginning of something healthier and more honest. "Look at that," Ryan said, nodding toward David and Stephen chatting animatedly with his parents. "Your parents tried to use your ex to create drama, and instead they helped us gain 2 new friends." I laughed. "The ultimate backfire." "That's the thing about manipulation," Ryan mused. "Once it's exposed to light, it loses all its power." As we swayed to the music, I rested my head on his shoulder and felt a profound sense of peace. "Thank you for standing with me through all of this." "Always," he promised. "That's what real family does." And in that moment, surrounded by chosen family and free from the burden of impossible expectations, I knew we had won something far more valuable than a perfect wedding day. We had claimed the right to define our own happiness on our own terms. The cake-cutting confrontation marked a turning point not just in our wedding day, but in my entire relationship with my parents. Though they had stormed out, their absence created space for authentic celebration rather than tension. As the evening progressed, Ryan and I enjoyed traditions that would have been impossible under my parents' critical gaze. We kicked off our shoes for the final hour of dancing. We shared silly, unguarded moments that would have earned disapproving glares. Most importantly, we surrounded ourselves with genuine love and acceptance. After my parents' departure, Stephanie approached me with concern. "Are you okay?" "That was intense." "Strangely, I feel better than I have in years," I admitted. "It's like I've been holding my breath around them my entire life, and I can finally exhale." Our wedding planner, Jessica, worked discreetly to ensure the evening's momentum continued without disruption. The DJ kept the dance floor packed, and the photo booth captured increasingly jubilant, and sometimes ridiculous, moments as the night progressed. Around midnight, as the reception was winding down, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Your mother is extremely upset. We expect an apology for your behavior tonight." I showed the message to Ryan, who raised his eyebrows. "Some people really don't get it, do they?" "They never have," I replied, putting my phone away without responding. But that's not my problem anymore. The next morning, Ryan and I hosted a farewell brunch for out-of-town guests at our favorite local cafe. The event had always been planned as a casual, intimate gathering without my parents' involvement, and their absence felt natural rather than conspicuous. As we moved among tables, thanking friends and family for sharing our day, several guests offered supportive comments about the previous night's confrontation. "Your speech took courage," said my college roommate Ellie. "I wish I'd had the strength to set boundaries with my own family years ago." Ryan's grandmother, a sharp-witted woman in her 80s, patted my hand. "In my day, we didn't talk about these things publicly, dear. We just simmered in resentment for decades. Your way is healthier, trust me." After the brunch, Ryan and I returned to our apartment to prepare for our honeymoon departure the following day. As we sorted through wedding gifts, my phone rang with my mother's number. "Should I answer it?" I asked Ryan. "That's entirely up to you," he replied. "But remember, you don't owe them immediate access anymore." I let the call go to voicemail, choosing instead to listen to the message later when I felt emotionally prepared. My mother's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Amber, your father and I are deeply disappointed in your behavior yesterday. To publicly humiliate us after everything we've done for you is beyond ungrateful. Call us when you're ready to discuss this maturely." No acknowledgement of their planned sabotage. No recognition of how their behavior had contributed to the situation. Just blame, as always. I played the message for Ryan, who shook his head in disbelief. "They really don't get it, do they? They were literally planning to humiliate you at your wedding, and they're upset that you called them out on it." Classic Darvo, I sighed, referring to the manipulation tactic: deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. They've always been experts at making me the problem. "So, what do you want to do?" Ryan asked. I considered the question carefully, aware that my response would set the tone for our future relationship with my parents, if there was to be one at all. "I think I need some time and space," I finally decided. "I'm not cutting them off permanently, but I'm not rushing to reconcile either. They need to understand that things have fundamentally changed." "I support whatever you decide," Ryan assured me. "Your relationship with them is yours to define." Our honeymoon, 2 weeks exploring the coastal villages of Portugal, provided perfect distance from the situation. With spotty internet service and a deliberate decision to minimize phone use, I was able to focus on beginning our marriage without the shadow of family drama. We walked hand in hand along rugged cliffs, sampled local wines, and lost ourselves in winding medieval streets. In a small restaurant overlooking the Atlantic, Ryan raised his glass. "To boundaries," he toasted. To boundaries, I agreed, clinking my glass against his. And to choosing joy. When we returned home, tanned and refreshed, I found 3 more voicemails and several texts from my parents, each increasingly urgent in tone. My father had also emailed Ryan's architecture firm under the pretense of potential business, clearly attempting to establish contact through alternative means. "They're escalating," Ryan observed as I showed him the messages. "This is what happens when manipulative people lose control. They try harder to regain it." After careful consideration, I composed an email to both my parents. "Mom and Dad, I need time to process everything that happened before and during the wedding. Your plan to undermine and embarrass me on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life revealed how little you respect me and my choices. I'm not cutting you out of my life permanently, but I am establishing firm boundaries. I'll contact you when I'm ready to discuss a path forward, but only if that path includes mutual respect and acceptance. Until then, please respect my space and do not attempt to contact Ryan at his workplace or pressure mutual connections to intervene. Amber." The response came within hours, a lengthy email from my mother filled with justifications and accusations. According to her version of events, they had only been trying to add perspective to the wedding, not sabotage it. My interpretation of their conversation was dramatically overblown, and my public confrontation had humiliated them needlessly. I read the email once, then archived it without responding. Their inability to acknowledge their behavior only confirmed that I needed distance. Over the following weeks, we settled into married life while navigating the aftermath of the wedding confrontation. Several of my mother's friends reached out with awkward messages, clearly having heard a sanitized version of events. Ryan's parents called regularly, offering support without pressure. 6 weeks after the wedding, an unexpected development occurred. David Whitman, my ex-boyfriend who had been unwittingly enlisted in my parents' plan, contacted me. "I had lunch with your father yesterday," he explained when we spoke by phone. "He reached out, supposedly to discuss a cardiology referral for a client, but spent most of the time fishing for information about you and trying to paint himself as the victim in all this." "That sounds about right," I sighed. "What did you tell him?" "I was direct," David replied. "I told him that manipulating me into attending your wedding as some sort of prop was inappropriate and disrespectful to everyone involved, you, Ryan, my husband, and me. I suggested that if he wants to repair his relationship with you, he needs to start with a genuine apology and some serious self-reflection." I felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you for that. Did he take it well?" David laughed. He looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. But then something interesting happened. He got quiet for a minute and asked if I really thought they'd been that bad. It seemed like maybe, just maybe, he was considering another perspective. This information gave me cautious hope. My father had always been less overtly critical than my mother, more focused on appearances and social standing than on directly controlling my choices. If he was capable of even momentary reflection, perhaps there was potential for change. 3 months after the wedding, I received a handwritten letter from my father, not an email or text, but an actual letter on his personal stationery. "Dear Amber," he wrote, "I've been doing a lot of thinking about your wedding day and the events leading up to it. While I still believe your mother, and I have always wanted what's best for you, I'm beginning to understand that our definition of best has been limited by our own expectations and biases. I attended a retirement party last week for Judge Michaels, who proudly introduced his daughter, a tattoo artist who had just opened her 3rd studio. He spoke about her with such genuine pride that it made me question why I've struggled to feel the same about your accomplishments just because they didn't match my predetermined vision. I'm not saying everything can be fixed overnight, but I am asking if you would consider meeting me for lunch, just the 2 of us, to begin a conversation. No pressure, no expectations. Regardless of your decision, I want you to know that watching you stand up for yourself and your values took courage that, frankly, I'm not sure I possess. Your mother isn't ready to have this conversation yet, but I hope someday she will be. With love, Dad." I read the letter to Ryan, who listened thoughtfully. "What do you think?" he asked when I finished. "I think it's the most genuine communication I've ever received from my father," I said slowly. "It's not a complete recognition of everything that happened, but it's a start. Do you want to meet him? I considered the question carefully. Yes, I decided. But on my terms, in a public place, with clear boundaries. The lunch with my father was awkward but productive. He was more reserved than usual, less quick to offer opinions or judgments. When I described how their criticism had affected me throughout my life, he listened without interruption, something he had never done before. Your mother and I come from families where success was defined very narrowly, he explained at one point. We thought we were helping you by pushing you toward what we considered the safest path. It never occurred to us that we might be causing harm. Intent doesn't erase impact, I pointed out. He nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. We parted with a tentative agreement to stay in contact while respecting my need for boundaries. My mother remained unwilling to acknowledge any wrongdoing, sending occasional texts that alternated between guilt trips and surface-level pleasantries, as if nothing had happened. 6 months after the wedding, we invited my father to dinner at our apartment, a significant step in rebuilding trust. He arrived with a bottle of wine and a slightly nervous demeanor. Your home is lovely, he commented, looking around with genuine interest rather than his usual critical assessment. Those photographs on the wall, are they yours, Amber? Yes, I confirmed, surprised he'd noticed. From our trip to Portugal. You've always had a good eye, he said, studying them more closely. I remember when you won that photography contest in high school. Ryan and I exchanged glances. This acknowledgement of a creative achievement my parents had previously dismissed as a hobby marked a small but significant shift. Throughout dinner, my father made visible efforts to engage with Ryan about his work without the condescending undertone that had characterized their previous interactions. He asked questions about our future plans without offering unsolicited advice. At the end of the evening, as he was preparing to leave, he paused at the door. I've been seeing someone, he admitted, seeming embarrassed. A therapist. Just once a week, to work on some things. The admission stunned me. In my family, therapy had always been dismissed as something for weak people who can't solve their own problems. That takes courage, Dad, I said sincerely. Yes, well, he cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the vulnerability. It seemed necessary if I want to be part of your life going forward. And I do want that, Amber. 1 year after our wedding, Ryan and I celebrated our anniversary with a small dinner party that included close friends and Ryan's parents. My father attended alone. My mother had declined the invitation with a terse note about prior commitments. During a toast, my father surprised everyone by addressing the events of the wedding directly. A year ago, I made serious mistakes that nearly cost me my relationship with my daughter, he acknowledged. I'm grateful for the second chance to be part of Amber and Ryan's lives, and I'm learning every day what it means to love someone for who they are rather than who you think they should be. Later, as we cleared dishes, Ryan's mother Karen squeezed my hand. Your father has come a long way, she observed. He's trying, I agreed. It's not perfect, but it's progress. And your mother? I shrugged. Some relationships can't be fully healed. I've made peace with that possibility. The confrontation at our wedding hadn't magically resolved 30 years of complex family dynamics, but it had broken a pattern of silence and compliance that had prevented any real change. By standing up for myself and my values, I'd created space for authentic relationships to develop, whether with my parents or without them. More importantly, I discovered my own strength. The girl who had spent decades seeking approval and validation had become a woman capable of defining her own worth, setting her own boundaries, and creating her own version of family. As Ryan and I fell asleep that night, his arms around me in our quiet bedroom, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The wedding day that my parents had planned to use as a weapon had instead become a catalyst for transformation. Their attempt to humiliate me had ultimately revealed their own limitations, while my response had illuminated a path toward genuine self-acceptance. Happy anniversary, Ryan murmured sleepily. Here's to many more. Many more, I agreed, thinking not just of anniversaries, but of all the choices we would make together, choices based on love and respect rather than fear and obligation. The last thought that drifted through my mind before sleep claimed me was simple but profound. Sometimes the most painful confrontations lead to the most liberating resolutions. And sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into. The morning after our anniversary celebration, Ryan and I lingered over coffee at our kitchen table, reflecting on the previous year and the remarkable journey we'd undertaken together. I never expected our wedding to become such a pivotal moment in my relationship with my parents, I admitted, cradling my mug between my hands. It was supposed to be about beginning our life together, not confronting my past. Maybe it was about both, Ryan suggested. Sometimes those moments of beginning and ending happen simultaneously. My phone buzzed with messages from friends who had attended our anniversary dinner. Stephanie sent photos she'd taken, capturing moments of genuine laughter and connection. Lisa thanked us for the evening, noting how much more relaxed I seemed compared to a year ago. "You're standing taller," she texted. It's like watching someone who's finally put down a heavy backpack they didn't even realize they were carrying. The metaphor resonated deeply. For decades, I'd been carrying the weight of my parents' expectations and criticisms, adjusting my posture and path to accommodate that burden. Setting it down had been terrifying, but ultimately liberating. Ryan's parents called that afternoon to check in before their flight back to Michigan. "We're so proud of the life you two are building," Karen said warmly. "And Amber, watching you navigate this situation with your parents with such grace has been inspiring." "I don't always feel graceful about it," I confessed. "Sometimes I still get angry thinking about what they plan to do." "That's completely natural," Michael assured me. "Healing isn't linear. You're allowed to have complicated feelings about complicated relationships." This unconditional support still felt novel after years of having my feelings dismissed or minimized by my own parents. Ryan's family had shown me what healthy family dynamics could look like, not perfect, but fundamentally rooted in acceptance and respect. Later that week, I received an email from my father with a link to a podcast about adult children of narcissistic parents. "My therapist recommended this," he wrote. "It's been uncomfortable but illuminating. Thought you might find it interesting too." This small gesture, acknowledging the problematic patterns in our family without becoming defensive, represented significant progress. My father was doing the internal work necessary for genuine change, even if my mother remained resistant. 6 months after our anniversary, I made the difficult decision to maintain very limited contact with my mother. Her emails and rare phone calls continued to follow the familiar pattern: subtle criticism disguised as concern, backhanded compliments, and a persistent refusal to acknowledge her role in our fractured relationship. "I just want things to go back to normal," she complained during one brief conversation. "I don't understand why you're still dwelling on ancient history." "It's not about dwelling," I explained patiently. "It's about recognizing patterns that are still happening right now, in this very conversation." "You've become so sensitive since you married Ryan," she sighed. "You used to be able to take constructive feedback." Rather than arguing further, I simply ended the call, establishing the boundary I'd been working on with my own therapist. I would not engage in conversations that followed the old toxic scripts. My relationship with my father, meanwhile, continued to evolve. We met monthly for lunch, carefully navigating a new dynamic where he asked questions instead of giving directives and shared his thoughts as offerings rather than pronouncements. It wasn't always smooth. Old habits resurfaced periodically, but the effort was consistent and genuine. During one such lunch, he surprised me by bringing up my career. "I read your series on urban food deserts," he said, referring to an investigative piece I'd recently published. "It was quite compelling. I never realized how many policy decisions contribute to nutritional inequality." Coming from a man who had once dismissed my journalism career as glorified blogging, this represented a seismic shift in his willingness to see value in my choices. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "That series meant a lot to me." "You've always had a strong sense of justice," he observed. "Even as a child, you couldn't stand to see anyone treated unfairly." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "I should have recognized that as a strength rather than stubbornness." These moments of connection and recognition, though small, began to build a foundation for a different kind of relationship, one based on who we actually were rather than who he had wanted me to be. On our second wedding anniversary, Ryan and I decided to host a vow renewal ceremony, not because our original wedding needed replacing, but because we wanted to celebrate with the close-knit community that had supported us through the challenges of the past 2 years. We chose a rooftop garden in downtown Chicago, with the city skyline as our backdrop and just 20 guests in attendance. My father came alone again, my mother having declined with a brief note about the unnecessary extravagance of celebrating an anniversary that wasn't a milestone. As we spoke our renewed promises to each other, I noticed my father wiping away a tear, a display of emotion I had rarely witnessed throughout my childhood. During the intimate dinner that followed, he raised his glass in a toast. "To Amber and Ryan," he said, his voice slightly unsteady. "Thank you for showing me what courage looks like and for giving me the chance to learn how to be a better father, however imperfectly. Your love for each other reminds me what family should truly be about: acceptance, support, and celebrating each other's authentic selves." The moment wasn't performative or designed to make himself look good, hallmarks of his previous public speaking. It was simply honest, a genuine expression of his ongoing journey. Later that evening, as guests mingled under string lights and the Chicago sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, David and his husband Stephen approached me. "We have news," David announced, grinning widely. "We're adopting a baby girl in November." As I hugged them both in genuine celebration, I reflected on the irony. My parents had brought David to my wedding hoping to create jealousy and regret. Instead, they had inadvertently helped us form a friendship that enriched both our lives. In quiet moments with Ryan, I sometimes marveled at the unexpected path my life had taken. If someone had told me 3 years ago that my wedding day would involve confronting my parents, losing my mother's presence in my life, but gaining a healthier relationship with my father, I would never have believed them. I said as we walked our dog Cooper through the neighborhood one crisp fall evening. "Life rarely follows the script we expect," Ryan observed. "But I think that's what makes it authentic." Authenticity had become my North Star. In my marriage, my friendships, my career, and even in my complicated relationship with my parents. Rather than contorting myself to fit others' expectations, I had learned to stand firmly in my own truth and surround myself with people who valued that truth. The wedding day confrontation that had once seemed so disastrous had actually been the catalyst for profound growth and healing. By refusing to accept the humiliation my parents had planned, I had not only protected our special day, but had also broken a generational pattern of emotional manipulation that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. My father's journey towards self-awareness and change demonstrated that growth was possible at any age, while my mother's continued resistance highlighted an equally important truth: we cannot force others to evolve at our pace or according to our needs. Sometimes the healthiest love we can offer is distance. As our 3rd year of marriage approached, Ryan and I began discussing having children, conversations that inevitably raised questions about what kind of parents we wanted to be and what relationship our children would have with my parents. "I want our kids to know your father," Ryan said thoughtfully. "The version of him that's emerging now, reflective, humble, willing to learn. That's a valuable relationship." "And my mother?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "That depends entirely on her willingness to interact with our children differently than she interacted with you," he said firmly. "Some boundaries aren't negotiable." The clarity of this position, protecting our future children from the same patterns that had wounded me, felt both right and sad. Family relationships weren't supposed to require such careful navigation and boundary setting. Yet here we were, creating a roadmap for healthier connections than those that had come before. In the end, the most important lesson I learned from my wedding day confrontation was that standing in your truth, however difficult, creates space for authentic relationships to flourish. By refusing to accept the narrative my parents had crafted for me, the dutiful daughter who would tolerate any treatment to maintain family harmony, I had written a new story. One where mutual respect and acceptance were non-negotiable requirements for being in my life. This stance had cost me the fantasy of a perfect family, but it had given me something far more valuable: Genuine connections based on who I actually was rather than who others wanted me to be. The wedding that was meant to humiliate me had instead become a powerful moment of reclaiming my narrative. The parents who had planned to make me a laughingstock had instead revealed their own limitations. And in that revelation, painful as it was, lay the seeds of genuine transformation. 3 years after that pivotal wedding day, I can honestly say I'm grateful for the harsh truth it revealed. Without that moment of clarity, I might have spent decades more trying to earn approval that was structurally designed to remain just out of reach. Instead, I discovered the freedom that comes from defining my own worth and choosing my own family, both the one I was born into, on my own terms, and the one I've created with Ryan and our circle of genuine friends. If you've ever struggled with toxic family dynamics or had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones, I hope my story gives you courage. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish or ungrateful, it makes you honest. And in that honesty lies the potential for relationships built on mutual respect rather than control and obligation. Have you ever had to confront toxic behavior from family members? How did you handle it, and what did you learn? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in navigating complicated family relationships. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into, and that's not just okay, it's necessary for healing.